FIDE Grand Swiss 2021 round 5 has just completed yesterday, and today we are going to look at a very interesting game between David Navara versus Gukesh. David Navara from Czech versus Gukesh from India. A very strong encounter between these two players. David Navara is having a rating nearly 2700 and Gukesh is having the rating of 2640. The game was very interesting, so without any further ado, let's check it out this game. So, David Navara with the white pieces started the game with 1e4, and Gukesh with the black pieces replied with c5. We have knight f3, knight c6, and the usual way to continue the position is to play d4, and we have the Sicilian defense. But David Navara chose knight c3, and we have the Sicilian defense closed variation e5, so that now white would be no longer to push d4 because now the e5 pawn is and the c5 pawn is covering the square of d4. Bishop c4, bishop e7, d3, d6, castle, and now we have h6 by black. Perhaps the idea could be to play g5, or perhaps the idea of playing h6 was so that black can develop the knight on f6, where white bishop cannot come to g5 because now the h6 pawn is covering the g5 square. So after h6, white played knight d5, centralizing the knight. We have knight f6, c3. Perhaps the idea could be to play d4 in the future. We have castle by black, a3. Definitely white is preparing to play b4 now, gaining more space on the queen side. We have knight into d5 and knight trade, bishop into d5, and now we have bishop to f6 by black. The idea of playing bishop f6 was so that to stop this d4 idea from white side, because now there are just 4 protection covering the d4 square. We have b4 by white, gaining more space on the queen side, and here black played knight to e7. Capturing the pawn on b4 would not be a nice idea because after into b4, white rook is just very nicely open, and white is also having a very large amount of queen side majority. So that 5 we have knight e7 by black, hitting the bishop on d5. Bishop came back to b3, and now we have b6 by black. So black wants to develop the bishop on b7, putting some pressure on the pawn on e4, or perhaps black can even go for some d5 ideas in the future. We have rook e1 by white, bishop b7, we have b into c5, and now we have d into c5. So the idea of capturing the c pawn with the d pawn here is now the d3 pawn is the backward pawn, because pushing the d4 is actually pretty hard because there are 4 pieces covering the square on d4. But after d into c5, white still pushed the pawn to d4. After d4, black played queen c7. All those who are wondering what will happen if black decides to capture the pawn on d4, here is, if we have c into d4, then after c into d4, e into d4, white is having a very strong move, which is e5, hitting the bishop. And if you try to move the bishop to g5, which is the only square for the bishop, then we have simply knight into g5, h into g5, bishop into g5, and white is having the bishop pair, whereas white is even a pawn up, and there is a very strong pawn on the e5 square, which gives a winning position to white. And even at the place of playing bishop g5, if black decides to capture the knight on f3 with the bishop, then still after queen into f3, bishop g5, bishop into g5, h into g5, white is still better in the position. The reason is very simple. The bishop on b3 is very powerful actually, and the pawn on e5 gives a very decisive advantage to white. And the d4 pawn for black side is pretty weak, and b5 and b7 is just on the same line, so which gives a winning position to white. So this is what all happened. So at the place of capturing the pawn with the pawn, black decided to play queen c7, waiting for what white wants to play. So after queen c7, David Navara played h4. h4 was not a nice idea. A much better move for white would have been to play d5 in the position. And after d5, white is having a very strong center, gaining more space on the center. And yep, you can push it anytime you want. And after playing d5, the black bishop on b7 becomes much weaker. And after d5, white can play c4, and then he can perhaps attack with h4. Okay, but David Navara played h4, which was not a nice move. And now Gukesh decided to capture the pawn on d4. We have c into d4, e into d4, and now we have e5 by white, hitting the bishop. We have bishop into f3 first, queen into f3, and your black simply captured the pawn on e5 with the bishop. And now comes a wow move, bishop into f7 check. Here black cannot capture the bishop because the rook is hanging on a8. So that's why after bishop into f7 check, black is forced to move the king to h8. Okay, so after king h8, white played queen to h5. Yep, now white is threatening to capture the bishop on e5. So black simply played knight to f5. The idea of playing knight f5 here is, if white tries to capture the knight on f5, there comes a very powerful move, the only winning move for black, which will give a winning position to black. Can you try to find the move? Okay, so I think you have a nice deep thought and you would have come up with the winning move, which is bishop to h2 check. The queen is protecting the bishop and it's a check. So the most natural move is to play king h1. And after king h1, we have rook into f7, capturing the bishop, hitting the queen. So here white cannot defend the pawn on f2. So if white tries to play queen g4, then black is having many ways to win the position. First of all, the pawn on d4 is already very powerful for black, which gives a very decisive advantage to black. So black can even play bishop e5 in the position, or he can even play d3, or even playing rook a to f8 would be winning move for black. So that was the reason queen into f5 was not played in the game. A very nice try by Gukesh. And here white played bishop to g6, simply pulling the bishop back, hitting the knight. So here black played queen to c3. Idea is very simple. Now black is hitting both the rooks on a1 as well as on e1. So you cannot capture the knight on f5 because queen into e1 is a checkmate. Game over for white. So that's why white played a very nice move and also one of the most natural moves. Bishop into h6, capturing the pawn. After bishop into h6, now the rooks are well connected, so no problem. So here black is having two options. He can capture the bishop with the pawn or with the knight. We have knight into h6, a nice move by David Navara, Gukesh, but if Gukesh would have captured the bishop with the pawn, not a nice move, because after bishop into f5, it's winning for white, because now there are many ways for white to win the position. The pawn on h6 is falling, even queen g6 threatening a mate, even perhaps at some point the bishop can also be captured by the rook on e5. It's winning. So that's why knight into h6 capturing with the knight, a very nice move. And now we have queen into e5. And rook into f2, very nice move by Gukesh. You cannot capture the rook because knight g4 check and white loses the queen. So after rook into f2, white played rook to c1, hitting the queen, and black simply captured the pawn on a3. And now black is having two passed pawns on the queen side, but still it's not easy to convert it. We have rook to c7 by white from David Navara. And now the idea is very simple. White wants to checkmate the black king on g7. So black played rook to f6, cutting the connection between the pawn and the rook. And after rook f6, we have bishop to e4 by white, hitting the rook on a8. So black played rook to d8. Perhaps the idea could be to play d3 in the future, trying to just use his passed pawn. And now we have queen to g5 by white. Yep, very nice move, threatening a checkmate on the g file. Queen f8, bishop to d3, not allowing black to push the pawn. We have knight g8 by black. Rook into a7, white simply captured the pawn. Rook to c8, queen to g4. We have rook rook to h6, and after rook to h6 comes a very nice move by white, rook to f7. Yep, just saying, okay, you can capture my rook, I'm having no problems. Okay, so after rook to f7, black decided to capture the rook, and now white simply captured the rook on c8. And after rook into c8, it's an equal position. White is having a slight edge, but it's still an equal position. And after queen into c8, black played b5. White simply captured the pawn on b5, and black played a bad move, a blunder move in the position, which is d3 by Gukesh, which turned out to be a blunder by Gukesh, because after d3 he must have calculated that, okay, after bishop into d3 it's winning for black, because now black is having a very powerful move, which is queen a7 check. After queen a7 check, if you cannot go to h2 because rook into h4 is already very strong. So after king f1, black can play rook f6 check, and after rook f6 check, white king is already very vulnerable, which gives a very winning position to black. So this was the idea of Gukesh, but he missed a very crucial move in the position, the only move for for white to win the position. Okay, so you can take a pause in the video, in this video, and you can try to find the winning move, the only winning move for white to win the position. Okay, so I think you must have a nice deep thought, and you would have come up with the winning move, which is bishop to c4. The bishop is protected by the queen, and the bishop on c4 is hitting the queen on f7 as well as the knight on g8, and there is no way to protect the knight on g8 if you try to move the queen. So here it's completely winning position now. So black played d2 for a final try, because now white cannot capture the queen, because d into e1 would turn out be winning position for black. So after d2, white played simply rook d1. David Navara is not going to mess up this position. We have queen a7 check, king h2. It looks like after rook into h4 check, perhaps black is winning, but nothing is happening, because after king g3, white is simply hitting the rook, and don't forget the checkmate on g8 happening. So you need to keep giving checks, or else you will lose the game. So that is the only way to give a check, by playing queen e3 check. Black lost his rook. We have queen f4 check, trying to make a repetition, but we have king h3, queen h6 check, king g4, and on the move number 41, after playing king g4, Gukesh with the black pieces resigned the game, and David Navara with the white pieces won the game. A fantastic game played by both the players. Many tactics came in the position. How many were you able to solve? Please tell me in the comment box below. And after king g4, many of you were thinking why Gukesh resigned in the position. He can still give checks like this. Yes, he can definitely go for a check like queen g6 check, king f3, but eventually there is no way black can win the position, or he can even draw the position, because there comes many checks, but white will soon capture the pawn on d2. He will soon be safe by grabbing all his pieces near to the king, and it would be game over. So that was the reason he didn't waste any time, and after playing queen h6 check, he himself resigned after playing queen h6, he resigned himself. So this was a fantastic game played by both the players, and this was the first loss in the tournament for Gukesh. Very well played by David Navara. So there are still many rounds left in the Grand Swiss 2021. So we are going to come up with more exciting games like this. So if you like this game, then please make sure to like the video, and if you are new to my channel, then please make sure to subscribe the channel, because it motivates me to upload new videos like this. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Chess Vibes.